December 19th, 2025, 4 trading days. That's all it took. In just 96 hours, 60% of COMEX's registered silver inventory was claimed for physical delivery. Not paper settlements, not cash equivalents, physical metal, bars that must physically leave the vault. Analysts are calling it a vault drain emergency, the kind of event that exposes decades of fraud in broad daylight. Here's what nobody's telling you. On January 1st, 2026, China implemented the most aggressive precious metals export controls since rare earth restrictions. Only 44 companies received authorization to export silver over the next 2 years. These companies control approximately 121 million ounces of annual exports, representing 60 to 70% of refined silver traded globally. The same day those controls went into effect, COMEX silver futures showed $72 per ounce. But physical bullion dealers in Japan and the UAE were selling, when they could find inventory, at $130 per ounce. In Shanghai, physical silver premiums exceeded $8 per ounce above COMEX prices throughout late December. The paper price and the physical price have completely decoupled, and here's the number that should terrify every investor holding paper silver. The current paper to physical ratio stands near 356 to 1. For every 1 ounce of physical silver that actually exists in vaults, there are 356 ounces worth of paper claims circulating in global markets. This system worked as long as everyone was content to hold paper. But the moment a fraction of those claims demand physical delivery, the entire structure collapses. And that moment is happening right now. If this information could save your portfolio, hit that subscribe button right now. Smash the notification bell. Share this video with every investor you know, because what I'm about to show you is the biggest supply crisis in precious metals history, and most people won't understand what's happening until their paper contracts are settled in cash at manipulated prices, while physical silver trades at 3 times that level. The COMEX system. How the fraud works. Let me explain exactly how COMEX operates and why this system is designed to fail. The commodity exchange, COMEX, is where futures contracts for silver, gold, and other metals are traded. It's run by CME Group. On the surface, it's a legitimate market where buyers and sellers agree on future delivery dates and prices. But underneath, there's a 2-tier system that most investors don't understand: eligible silver and registered silver. Eligible inventories are metals stored in CME-approved warehouses. These are not necessarily delivered onto the exchange itself. The owners of that metal might just be using the warehouse as secured storage space. Eligible metal can belong to anyone: investment funds, industrial users, private holders. CME has no direct control over eligible inventories. The owners can pull that metal out at any time for any reason. Registered silver is completely different. When the holder of eligible metal delivers it onto the exchange, a warehouse receipt is issued. The metal's status changes from eligible to registered. Only registered metal can be used for delivery against futures contracts. This is the metal that actually backs the paper contracts being traded. And here's the critical point. As of late December 2025, COMEX registered silver inventories stand at approximately 40 million troy ounces. That's all the physical metal available to settle futures contracts demanding delivery. Meanwhile, open interest for silver futures across all contract months totals hundreds of millions of ounces in claims. The registered category, the actual deliverable metal, has been shrinking dramatically. COMEX registered inventories in the United States are down nearly 70% since 2020. Let me repeat that. 70% of the deliverable silver supply has vanished in just 5 years, and it's accelerating. From the recent inventory peak, COMEX silver warehouses have fallen by nearly 70 million ounces over just the last few months. In late 2025, within just 4 trading days, 60% of registered inventory was claimed for delivery. That's not normal market activity. That's a bank run. When depositors realize the bank doesn't have enough cash to honor everyone's withdrawals, they rush to get their money out first. That's exactly what's happening in the silver market right now. Sophisticated institutions understand the paper system is over-leveraged. They're demanding physical delivery before the metal runs out completely. The backwardation warning signal. Now let me explain backwardation, because this is the smoking gun that proves the physical shortage is real. In normal commodity markets, futures prices trade above spot prices. This is called contango. It makes sense because holding physical commodities has costs: storage, insurance, transportation. So buyers are willing to pay more for future delivery than current delivery. But since September 2025, silver has been in backwardation. The spot price, the price for immediate delivery, is trading above the futures price. This is extremely rare and extremely significant. Backwardation signals that the immediate demand for physical metal is so intense that buyers are willing to pay a premium to get it now rather than wait for future delivery. They're bidding up the spot price because there's not enough physical supply available. Throughout late December 2025, backwardation in silver reached up to $3,000 per contract. That means if you held a 5,000-ounce futures contract, you could make $3,000 just by taking immediate delivery instead of rolling to a future month. That's a 60-cent per ounce premium for getting the metal now. Why would anyone pay a premium to get silver immediately instead of waiting? Because they're not confident the silver will actually be there in the future. This is the market screaming that physical supply is disappearing. And it's not just COMEX. The London Bullion Market Association vaults have lost around 40% of their holdings since 2020. Shanghai inventories have fallen to their lowest level in a decade, dropping below 446 tons, the lowest since 2016. Over 300 tons left Shanghai vaults in October 2025 alone. This is a global phenomenon. Physical silver is vanishing from every major vault system simultaneously. China's export ban, the trigger event. On January 1, 2026, China implemented export restrictions that fundamentally altered the global silver market. Under the new policy, only large state-approved companies are allowed to export silver, and only after obtaining special government licenses. To qualify, firms must meet two stringent conditions: an annual production capacity of at least 80 tons of silver, and meeting all relevant environmental and safety regulations as determined by the state. These requirements effectively blocked hundreds of smaller and mid-sized exporters who have long served as key suppliers to global industrial users and investment markets. Only 44 companies received authorization to export silver over 2026 through 2027. These gatekeepers control approximately 121 million ounces of annual exports, representing 60 to 70% of refined silver traded globally. Think about what this means. China was a net exporter in 2025. They exported over 4,000 tons of silver in the first 11 months of 2025 while importing only 220 tons. They're a massive net exporter, and now they're cutting off that supply to the West while their own domestic buyers panic buy physical metal at any price. This isn't about trade policy. This is about control. China is deliberately forcing a bifurcation of the silver market, a physical market that they control through Shanghai pricing and export restrictions, and a paper market in the West that's increasingly disconnected from physical reality. Even Elon Musk publicly criticized the restrictions on December 27, 2025, highlighting concerns over silver supply constraints and noting its essential role in numerous industrial processes. When one of the world's most prominent industrialists is publicly worried about silver availability, that tells you the shortage is affecting real production. The price decoupling. Paper versus physical. Here's where the fraud becomes undeniable. On January 1, 2026, while COMEX silver futures showed $72 per ounce, physical bullion dealers in Japan and the UAE were selling when they could find inventory at $130 per ounce. That's an 80% premium. In Shanghai, physical silver premiums exceeded $8 per ounce above COMEX prices throughout late December. Indian buyers offered $5 premiums just to secure metal. Pamp Swiss Diwali Lakshmi 1-ounce silver bars were listed at 470.83 UAE dirhams in late December, approximately $128.20 US dollars. The AED to USD exchange rate has remained pegged near 0.272. So that's not currency fluctuation. That's a massive physical premium. And across Asia, China, Japan, Taiwan, queues formed outside bullion dealers as physical inventory simply vanished from the market. When a market splits this violently between paper contracts and physical delivery, one of two things is happening. Either the paper price is completely fake, manipulated far below the true market clearing price for physical metal, or there's no actual silver backing those paper contracts, meaning the system is fundamentally fraudulent. The evidence suggests both are true simultaneously. The paper price is suppressed through massive short positions and unlimited contract creation, and the physical backing is grossly insufficient to honor delivery demands. This is the classic Ponzi structure. As long as only a small percentage of participants demand redemption, the system functions. But the moment redemption requests exceed available inventory, the fraud collapses. March 2026. The reckoning approaches. While open interest for near months remains relatively modest, less than 4,000 contracts for January and around 1,000 for February, March 2026 stands out dramatically. Over 118,000 contracts. In practical terms, this is equivalent to 600 million ounces of physical silver. That's 15 times the entire registered COMEX inventory. Analysts at the Sirius report point out there is no way of meeting such demand. Even if only 10 to 20% of those contracts stand for delivery, the required metal would exceed the readily available free float. March is still weeks away, but monitoring this open interest should be on the radar of every precious metals investor. The setup is the exact opposite of the oil futures crash in April 2020. In that case, too many contracts came to delivery with nowhere to store the oil, so prices went negative. In silver, too many contracts are coming to delivery with not enough metal to deliver, so physical premiums explode. And we're already seeing institutional positioning that suggests major players understand what's coming. The first delivery report of 2026 reveals massive activity. JP Morgan aggressively positioning to take maximum delivery. Most futures traders close or roll positions before expiration to avoid the hassle of physical handling. But here, over 1,000 contracts in a single day, thousands month to date, went to actual delivery. Sellers providing real silver bars from approved vaults. Buyers taking ownership and moving metal to storage. This is normal market mechanics on the surface. But the volume and big bank involvement, especially JP Morgan and Citibank taking large amounts while Deutsche Bank delivers, stand out dramatically. These are the same institutions that have historically been accused of manipulating silver prices downward through massive short positions. Now they're flipping long and demanding physical delivery. That tells you everything about where they think this market is heading. The structural supply deficit. Let me show you why this isn't a temporary squeeze that can be resolved through normal market mechanisms. This is a structural deficit that has been building for years and is now reaching a breaking point. Metals Focus, one of the most respected precious metals research firms, wrote in late December 2025 that the world is facing the deepest silver supply deficit ever on record. Approximately 295 million ounces for 2025 once ETF flows are counted. That's not a typo. A 295 million ounce deficit in a single year. The cumulative silver deficit since 2019 now tops 1.3 billion ounces. That's years of consumption exceeding production. Where did that silver go? Into industrial applications that don't return it to the market, into solar panels, into electronics, into medical devices, into batteries. Silver's industrial demand has become the dominant force in its market. Between 50 and 60% of annual silver consumption now comes from technology and manufacturing sectors. Each solar panel requires approximately 20 grams of silver for its conductive efficiency. With global solar capacity expanding exponentially to meet climate goals, this alone consumes hundreds of millions of ounces annually. Electric vehicles use significantly more silver per vehicle than traditional combustion engines. The shift to EVs is structural and permanent. 5G infrastructure, AI data centers, advanced electronics all require increasing amounts of silver. And here's the critical point. Unlike investment demand, which can be satisfied with paper claims or recycled metal, industrial demand requires actual physical silver. You cannot build a solar panel with a futures contract. You cannot manufacture electronics with an ETF share. The industrial users must have real metal. And when industrial users realize that COMEX and LBMA paper prices are disconnected from physical availability, they start securing physical supply directly. They bypass the futures markets entirely. They lock in long-term supply agreements. They build strategic inventories. This removes even more physical metal from the available supply. The recycling myth. Some analysts point to recycling as a potential source of new supply. The data doesn't support this optimism. Recycling contributes roughly 180 million ounces annually. That figure has remained stagnant for years. Why? Because most modern industrial applications use such small amounts of silver per unit that recycling isn't economically viable. The silver in a smartphone or a solar panel is worth a few dollars at most. The cost to collect, process, and refine that silver often exceeds its value. So it's not recycled. It's lost, permanently removed from the available supply. Meanwhile, primary mine production is not increasing fast enough to offset the deficit. Global mine production grew by less than 3% in 2024. That's not nearly sufficient to close a 295 million ounce annual deficit. And mining is a long cycle business. Even if silver prices double, it takes years to bring new mines into production. Exploration, permitting, construction, ramp up. The fastest timeline is 5 to 7 years. More realistically, 10 to 15 years for a major new mine. So there is no quick or scalable solution to silver's structural deficit, the paper manipulation machine. For decades, the silver market has been dominated by paper contracts, futures, forwards, ETFs, and derivatives that represent claims to silver rather than actual metal. This system has become dangerously over-leveraged. The current paper-to-physical ratio stands near 356 to 1. For every 1 ounce of physical silver in vaults, there are 356 ounces worth of paper claims circulating in global markets. As long as investors and institutions are content to hold paper exposure, this system can function. But if even a small fraction of participants demand physical delivery, the market faces a catastrophic short squeeze. A scenario where there simply isn't enough silver to meet contractual obligations. This structural fragility is now being exposed in real time. Market makers are stepping back, liquidity is thinning, volatility is spiking as trust in the paper system erodes. Silver prices are not just reacting to supply-demand fundamentals, they're reacting to the realization that the market's underlying structure is no longer credible. And here's the mechanism of manipulation. Large banks, particularly JP Morgan, have historically held massive short positions in silver futures. These short positions artificially suppressed prices by creating unlimited paper supply. When physical buyers tried to push prices higher, the banks would sell thousands of additional futures contracts, flooding the market with paper silver and capping the rally. This worked for decades because most market participants were content to trade paper. They never demanded delivery, but now that's changing. Industrial users need physical metal. Investment funds are realizing paper claims are worthless if they can't be converted to physical. Geopolitical tensions are driving nations to secure physical reserves. All of this is creating unprecedented delivery demands. The December 2025 margin hike, bailout in disguise. On December 27, 2025, CME Group, the entity that runs COMEX, announced a margin requirement increase for silver futures. Margin requirements are the amount of cash traders must post to hold a futures position. CME raised these requirements by approximately 50% in a single day to $25,000 per contract. This forced mass liquidation of retail long positions. Traders who were betting on higher silver prices suddenly needed to post significantly more cash to maintain their positions. Many couldn't or wouldn't. They were forced to close their positions, selling futures contracts. This created a wave of selling pressure that temporarily hammered spot prices nearly 15% in a matter of days. Silver dropped from over $80 to below $72 in intraday trading. The mainstream financial media called this a silver crash. They said speculators got wiped out. They said the silver rally was over. But here's what really happened. This was a deliberate weaponization of margin requirements designed to save deeply short bullion banks from the impending physical shortage. Think about the timing. China's export ban was set to go into effect on January 1, 2026, just days away. Physical premiums were already exploding in Asia. COMEX registered inventories were being drained at record pace. The banks that were short hundreds of millions of ounces of paper silver were facing a nightmare scenario, delivery demands they couldn't meet with a physical shortage about to get dramatically worse. So they engineered a panic. They convinced CME to raise margin requirements at the worst possible time for long position holders. This forced liquidation, temporarily suppressing paper prices and allowing major banks to cover short positions before physical shortages hit.